Hi, I'm Samantha Mazzell, and this is Slide UX's interview series for Human's Sake, where I chat with people who enhance users' experiences virtually and in the flesh. I'm grateful to have a chance to chat with Leslie Wingo. Thank you so much. Leslie owns the most impressive list of titles: President and CEO of Sanders Wingo, Advertising Badass, TEDx keynote speaker, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert, wife, mom, and enophile. Save yourself a trip to Google. It's a wine connoisseur. So cheers on that. That's the perfect Friday guest if I've ever had one.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thankful to reconnect with you. So one thing I wanted to just jump right into is it's so amazing, reading about how Sanders Wingo describes itself, herself, themselves. You're running a Texas-based independent creative agency, and your team is emphasizing understanding humans and understanding the irrational choices that humans make. So you didn't say communicate to humans and you didn't say influence humans, you understand them. And that sounds like a pretty empathetic distinction you're making there. So why is that important and how are you doing that?
It's interesting. There's so many things that come into play when people are making decisions. And I think for me, it boils down to two things. People want to belong and they want to know that they're going to be okay. And just because it boils down to those two things doesn't mean it's not complicated, because it is. And I've been looking, as we move through this time of COVID, this sense of belonging and finding belonging when we're not together. I think the thing I've been seeing a lot of, how do we do this alone together? So instead of meeting in person, which I would love to meet you in person, we're doing things like Zoom calls and phone calls and WhatsApp. And for some of us, we're meeting our neighbors for the first time, social distancing rules, of course. And we're developing new relationships just from 6 feet away. I was a bike ride with my daughter and my husband, my son. And I was like, I knew people lived in these houses. I had just never seen them before. So these kind of things are new, where we're in close proximity. It's irrational that I don't know the people who live next door to me, but yet I've met them for the first time because we've all been quarantined to our neighborhoods. I think for other people, this belonging is we're joining virtual book clubs, and I've been following Black Twitter because I want to know what's happening in the African American community.
Yeah.
And, we're watching shows, what should we binge watch, and talking within our online communities because that's how we feel like we belong. And then some of us don't have a choice of belonging because we have to go out and work, and we don't have the luxury of sheltering in place. And then I also talked about this sense of being okay. And what's interesting to me during this time of COVID is how people are feeling okay. So in the beginning of it, I feel like the thing to do was to get toilet paper.
Yeah.
And not just like a normal thing of toilet paper. It was packs and packs and packs of toilet paper. And the toilet paper disruption is still affecting us because sometimes it's still hard to get toilet paper. So that's an irrational decision. I get that people needed toilet paper, but did you need like 5 things of toilet paper from Sam's and Costco? It's an irrational purchase, but it's a purchase that made somebody feel okay. And for other people, we can see it being okay and changing the way that we communicate and how we consume products and services, how we shop. For example, I want my family to be okay, and my local grocery store now has an app that I now use. They probably had the app for forever. You plug it in and you just drive up and then your groceries are brought to you. It is amazing. And I had never done that before. The question is, once we get on the other side of COVID, will I go shop for my own groceries again?
What do you think?
And right now, I don't know. There's the convenience of the app, right? So they know exactly what I'm getting, but sometimes the things that I want aren't on the app, and you have to go in the store to get the very unique, specific type of cheese that I like. It's called Acevedo cheese. My kids like it, but you can't get it on the app.
Yeah.
So
do you think people buy, and I guess it's probably just person to person, but like, do humans buy more when they're in person and it's like kind of more the impulse buy, or I know what I'm doing, versus online where you can also have the impulse buy, right? They're like, we're recommending this add-on,
It's funny because I've been doing the curbside pickup.
Yeah.
And then I realized I needed like one thing from the grocery store that I needed, or the kids needed, something that was substantial. So I was going to go to the store quickly. That doesn't exist anymore. So that was a
No.
change in behavior. And what I realized as I left the store with my $85 worth of groceries,
Oh, yeah.
I impulse buy a lot when I shop. But
Yeah.
when I'm online, I have a list and I stick to my list.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't
I
know. I think
know.
the way consumerism and how it changes will be really interesting too. I think
Really.
so we've moved past toilet paper, and now I think the new trend is baking bread,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the explosion of people making sourdough at home. If people want to make it for me, I'm very happy to eat their sourdough, but that you can't get yeast.
Yeah.
So supply chains are disrupted, so you can't get yeast at the stores, but they're not selling enough yeast to restaurants for them to produce, and so I think we'll start to see a shift in new economies, and we'll see where people become rational and irrational at the same time.
Yeah.
And when it comes to decisions, there's rational choices and become irrational decisions in terms of, should I save my money to buy my medicine, or
Mhm.
do I use that money to buy my medicine?
Mhm.
Medicine or groceries, medicine or groceries. So it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I mean, and it with y'all's client, and you don't need to divulge any, proprietary or confidential information, but like thinking about brands that you work with and sort of understanding the human now, how that influences the way in which you're servicing your brands. I mean, anything, we're so early on something that we all know is going to be long.
Hmm.
I don't know, anything come up with,
Yes. When I look at brands, they're so complex and simple at the same time, just like human beings, so complex and simple. So a lot of the things I'm curious about for meetings is how many more meetings will we start to do like this, instead of, I need to fly to New York, and then I need to fly to Chicago, and this time of togetherness. I think that's one thing to consider. And then when I talk to brands and talk to the clients I'm talking to now, the playbook that existed in January is never
yeah,
going to exist again.
yeah.
So how do we get comfortable being very uncomfortable, and like being comfortable with things that are incomplete? Because
Mhm.
right now I think there has to be a right tone for things, but we also, a lot of our clients, we plan around events, and there's a likelihood that the NFL may not happen this year, or if it
Mhm.
does happen, how will it be different? Same goes with NCAA. And so all of these experiences that we want to partake in have completely changed. And so
Mhm. And so
it's
on
going to be
that
different.
tone, yeah, and on that tone, how does that work? Is it just, y'all sort of start conversations with your clients around, this kind of, it sounds like this is how humans are this is how society is responding right now. We
Mhm.
suggest this kind of a tone, or I don't know, like how do you work on that?
So I have been very curious and been listening to a lot of economists and futurists, right?
Yeah.
They have these crazy brains. It's just really interesting, and how they look at the world and these life-changing events. And so one person was talking about September 11th,
Mhm.
and at what point was it okay for the United States to move forward and laugh again?
Mhm.
And so I think it was SNL, Saturday Night Live,
Mhm.
put the stake in the ground, say it's okay to do these
Mhm.
things again. And
Mhm.
I feel like we're laughing at ourselves because I've seen it on Twitter and I've seen it on Instagram. I think
Mhm.
what I'm curious to know is when we'll feel okay being together again.
Mhm.
And together can be at work. I mean, will I ever be comfortable sending my kids to school? How does that
Hmm.
look and feel? Because people are coming in and out of school all the time, from teachers and educators and
Yeah.
um, parents, and picking up the kids anyway. So when will it be okay for us to be together again? And will we ever go back to doing something as routine as shaking someone's hand?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know.
So, among the many hats that you wear, and of course, presumably all at the same time, is your expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, more and more, there's language and context that we're able to better understand diversity and equity and inclusion. And as we know, certainly it's always evolving. And I'm just sort of wondering, when you're speaking with individuals or teams or clients, are there any sort of standout missteps, that are coming up? Something's not noticed. People are feeling like, "Yep, got this." Didn't hurt anyone in the room, or whatever. Everybody feels comfortable when I'm in the lead, and you're sort of seeing little or larger things that people might want to change.
hmm I think one of the groups that I follow is The Hustle, and they had a quote that said, "People hate two things: change and the way things are,"
Yeah.
which is my favorite quote.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to the diversity, equity, inclusion work, people make mistakes, and sometimes they don't know that they've made the mistake.
Yeah.
And so part of that is being able to walk, you got to be able to, it can't be incumbent on the minority or the woman in the room to address the mistake. It's going to take all of us to move that needle. I think companies are also hopefully moving away from this idea of we have to check all of the boxes to meet our
Totally.
diversity goals,
Hmm.
because that's not a measurement, is not success. Change is a success. I think the last thing that I've seen, that I'm starting to see a little bit of a shift, but I wish there was more, and we'll see what happens after we get to the other side of the pandemic. But the CEO and the COO have to be fully vested into this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we can't solve it after there's been a mistake.
Hmm.
We got to think about it before. So the investment, in my opinion, should happen before there's ever a problem, so you can anticipate what some of those things might be. And we have clients that do it, and then we have, where some clients are asking us to help them in the middle of something. But it's more effective to have the conversation before than after.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep, absolutely. And in this remote world that we're all in, wondering about ways in which diversity and inclusion, how that's coming into play with just the way in which people are interacting in more of a virtual sense too.
And I think what we're seeing a lot of when it comes to the diversity and inclusion work, not just for the industry I'm in, which is advertising and communication, but what does that look like when it comes to education? And
Yeah.
that we have pockets of kids who don't have access to the internet, nor do they
Hmm.
have a device that gets them on the internet. So they're
Hmm.
automatically, that's an inclusive issue, that's a problem. Or when it's access to healthcare, and how do we get better healthcare for everybody? And why is it that certain populations are more affected by this pandemic than others? And so I
Hmm.
think these are the questions that, while we knew they were there, they're just more, they're highly elevated
Hmm.
in this conversation of COVID. And I'm hoping that moving forward, we can recognize these things and talk
Hmm.
about these things to create not fixed systems, but create new systems that work. I think it's going to take a bigger imagination
Hmm.
and not reverting back to what we were doing before. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of things that I'm sure people are working on now, but this part of it is very important to me, because I want to be in a world where we no longer have to have this conversation, because it's part of our
Totally.
culture and what we do.
Totally. And I watched a talk that you had given, and an example that you used was how a simple sort of ways in which we get to know each other. And there's a particular, let's see if I can feed it to you so you'll know what I'm thinking of. We'll play a game. If I'm just meeting you for the first time, there's oftentimes a question that we might ask the other person that, is kind of a get to know you question, and really kind of is gauging much more than what it's surfacely asking. And that question
Mm-hmm.
is,
I am from El Paso, Texas, and El Paso, Texas, the question is, where did you go to high school?
it's the question totally. Yeah.
And that idea, it's interesting, because even when you go to college, it's like, well, where are you from? Okay, so you're from Dallas. What neighborhood in Dallas? Oh, okay. So then all sorts of assumptions are made about you, and stories are created about you by just asking this one basic question. And it's interesting. All of a sudden, you know where I'm from. You probably have an idea of what my parents might do, and my family background, things that I grew up with, things I had and didn't have. And that list can go on and on and on by that simple question of where are you from, or in my case, where did you go to high school? And it's fascinating. It's completely fascinating. And so the other half of that is when people ask me, well, you're from El Paso. I'm like, yes, I know there are Black people from El Paso,
Totally,
Texas.
totally. I'm like a Jew from Houston. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
They're like,
yes.
wait, you're Jewish? Wait, Houston? I'm like, yeah, there's some horns under here somewhere. I mean,
As a set aside, the founder of our company, David Sanders, was Jewish.
Yeah.
And my father wears the Star of David because the people who taught him the apparel business in New York were also Jewish. See,
Schmata.
it all comes together.
Oh,
Mhm.
always. It always does. But yeah, I mean, I brought it up to my husband yesterday. I was like, by the way, how many times I say, where'd you go to school? Or what neighborhood do you live in? And it is looking for connection, right? Let's be
Mhm.
real. It is looking for, do we have something in common? But like, and it's also creating a whole story that may or may not be true.
Correct.
It was just such a simple nugget there to leave aside.
Uh huh.
Um,
Uh huh.
well, I know we just have a few minutes together remaining here, so I'll end with this question, which is: I know you have a couple of children. Your daughter's around
Mhm.
7, and your son's
Yes.
around 3. And as a fellow parent, I know that I have some key phrases that are coming up a lot around my house. The main one that I'm saying these days, and I did say it yesterday, and I'm just, it's not helpful. But the main thing I'm saying these days is like, be careful on that rock. Like, we can't go to the doctors right now. What a great little pocket to be a kid in, you
Uh
know?
huh. Uh
And I'm
huh.
wondering if you're repeating any sort of key phrases with your kids these days.
Oh, this is such a good question. My favorite one is no, 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 because I said so. No, but I love you, but I no.
It's like
There's
con, pro, con. It's supposed to be more pro, con, pro, but I heard the con in there. I heard the pro in there.
And then the other funny one that I keep coming across.
Hey!
There's my daughter. Come say
That
hi.
was
Come
right
speak
on
over and say hi.
cue.
Okay, let me finish this. I'll come find
Hi.
you in a second. I'll call her back.
I want to send that's the one I'm on the phone.
I'm
I'm in a
phone.
meeting.
I'm on a Zoom call. Well, it's not a call.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh
they can
God.
see you. It's usually, and I'll explain later. It's usually what comes after that. Eliana, don't forget about your Zoom meeting.
Oh
She has Zoom
yeah.
calls. She has,
That's so wild.
uh-huh. And my favorite question is, where is my iPad? Which one of you
Oh.
has my iPad? So it's more of a question than anything else. Where's my iPad?
Oh man. Well, you're doing it. And what I would say is it looks as if you're doing it beautifully. So,
Thank
you
you.
know, we're in it, and I am so glad to have had a chance to chat with you, Leslie. And
Thank you
I
for this. This has been great.
I really, really, really want to stay connected. So
Let's do it.
please, okay, let's please stay connected. All
Have a
right. Best
wonderful
to
weekend.
you. Same to
Thank you.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.